Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining me here at the Right Side View and for checking out my first video. So let's get into this. We have yet another liberal, insane, lunatic, leftist meltdown over a conservative Republican who had the audacity of sitting down at a public restaurant with a couple of her friends to have a nice lunch. This time it was Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who was asked to leave a Little Rock, Arkansas establishment because the customers and the staff were, quote, uncomfortable and felt threatened. So let's check out the story.
Lunch with friends has turned into a political dust-up for Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders. She says the proudly progressive owners of a Little Rock bakery and coffee shop asked her to leave late last week. The governor and management at the Croissanterie have slightly different accounts, but both say she joined friends for lunch last Friday. Her security detail drew attention in the restaurant, and her presence made some staff and others, customers, uncomfortable. Both accounts say after about an hour, management approached a member of the detail and asked if the party could wrap things up. The governor had already paid and her group did indeed leave. As she did, a man in the restaurant shouted something and flipped the bird. The governor out with a statement, you saw a part of it there, is saying the restaurant didn't, quote, meet the standard of warm hospitality Arkansas is known for, while a statement from the restaurant issued this afternoon says the decision to ask the governor to leave was not made lightly and that they choose to prioritize the comfort of staff and guests while providing service respectfully and without escalation. Now, this isn't the first time the now governor has drawn attention to getting kicked out of a restaurant. Back in 2018, a small restaurant in Virginia asked the then White House press secretary to leave before getting served. The owner in that case said staff felt uncomfortable because of Trump administration policies.
All right, so let's get a little bit more details on this incident. Republican Arkansas Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders is speaking out over an incident in a restaurant in her home state where she says she was treated rudely and asked to leave by staff while having lunch. She says, last week I was having lunch with two other moms at a restaurant when the owner approached a member of the state police executive protection detail and said that my presence made their employees feel threatened and told us to leave. Sanders said in a statement Thursday about her recent dining experience at the Croissanterie restaurant in Little Rock, Arkansas. And I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce that, but that's the way I'm going to say it. So Sanders' office tells Fox News Digital that the governor visited the establishment on Friday, March the 13th, along with her security detail, which was two guys from what I understand, so a total of 5 people, along with her security detail, and after about an hour and 15 minutes during which her group was seated at 2 tables, so 5 people at 2 tables, and had already paid and tipped staff, the restaurant's owner approached a member of the security detail and requested that the governor leave. So this restaurant has a policy, 90-minute policy per that's for sitting at their table. And so they were an hour and 15 minutes in. They still had 15 minutes before they reached that 90-minute time limit. But these lunatics could not wait to kick her out. And so they rushed there to do that. Of course, they took the money first and got the tips and then went to kick her out. Her office said that the request was made due to concerns that her presence was making employees feel threatened and uncomfortable due to her political views. I believe that 100%, even though they're going to deny it later on. So Sanders and her party complied with the request and exited the restaurant. So you notice there was no making a scene. There was no yelling and screaming. There was no pounding the table and demanding their money back for being treated so rudely. They politely stood up and exited the restaurant. And as they were leaving, an individual standing with the restaurant staff shouted for them to go, and he made a crude hand gesture in the governor's direction, flipped her off. So you see the dichotomy there between how the party that was told that they weren't welcome there anymore got up and quietly were walking out of the restaurant, and one of the offended individuals decided to shout out for them to leave and flipped her off. So shows you the difference between the two sides. So the Croissanterie restaurant, they released a lengthy statement about the incident to local media, saying when they first learned that she had arrived at the establishment, they were surprised and uncertain how best to respond. Why? You're a freaking restaurant. Your job is to make food, hope that people come in and order that food, eat it, pay for it, and leave. And that's exactly what was happening here. But they, for some reason, they were surprised and uncertain how best to respond. So by the time we entered the dining room, she was already seated and eating. At that point, and these are the owners talking, I guess. So at that point, we chose not to interrupt. That was awfully nice of them, expecting that the party would complete their meal and depart without issue, which is what they were doing. They were eating, talking, they paid for their food, they tipped, and they were going to leave. And you're the ones that made the issue. You're the ones that couldn't stand somebody who has a different political view than you being in that restaurant, living their lives, not miserable like you are. And that's the thing about these people. These liberals are so miserable. And they cannot stand when they see people who are not miserable like they are, who are enjoying their lives, living their lives. And so it's not enough for them to just be miserable and live in their little miserable bubble. They got to spread that misery to other people. And that's what they live for. And that's why they're easily offended. And they tell you to your face they're offended. They want to make you as miserable as they are. So the restaurant says that as time went on, the governor's security detail became more widely noticed by both employees and guests, and questions were raised about them remaining in the restaurant. Again, these are the owners talking as business owners and members of this community. We recognize that any course of action carried consequences. Allowing her to stay risked being perceived as a lack of support for the community that makes up the majority of our team, as well as their families and friends. Conversely, asking her to leave would be viewed as denying service based on differing beliefs, which that's what it was. And the restaurant says they ultimately made the decision to support our employees and guests who expressed that they were uncomfortable, but said, we do not recall any statements indicating that anyone felt threatened. And I don't believe that for a minute. That's why they put the we do not recall in there, because they know that was actually said, that people said they felt threatened, but they realize how petty and pathetic they would look if they admitted to that. So they just say we don't recall. And that covers them in case somebody was secretly videotaping all this and they could come back later to bite them. But so they said we do not recall. But going back, so the statement allowing her to stay risked being perceived as a lack of support for the community that makes up the majority of our team. So in case you had any interest or wondered who that community is that makes up the majority of their team, here's a picture of the owners of this restaurant. It kind of tells you all you need to know. There they are. So that's the dynamic duo there. The tons of fun. Now, I guess not fun, but tons works. But now you know. And why do they always look like this? I mean, I know I've heard other people say that, but I wonder the same thing. I mean, you didn't even have to see this picture. Somebody took you to a police station and you went to the sketch artist. This is the description you'd give. This is kind of very close to the drawing they come up with. If you had to describe what they would look like. They just always look like this. I don't get that, but Well, that's it, guys. I appreciate you taking the time to watch the video and look forward to seeing you in the next one.